right, this is the Brown Duke Gun Show. My name is JP Garcia, here today, as always, with Brandon Elias. The Brown Duke Gun Show is the official podcast for Sentry Defense Indoor Range in Youngsville, Louisiana. If you're in our area, please come by, shoot with us, see all of the stuff we have in the store. And if you're not here in the area, check out sentrydef.com. You can get everything that you can in the store online. We'll drop ship it to you. Very easy. We take all of that stuff on the website, and you can order what you want.
Yep.
So today we are going to talk about training, how to get better, what you want to focus on when you're practicing in dry fire, live fire, whether you are a beginner shooter, you've never shot a gun before, all the way up to the advanced shooter, the competition shooters, defensive, all of that stuff. We're going to try to cover that at least at a high level. And then maybe, depending on what you guys want to hear, just let us know in the comments. You know, we'll start to maybe do other videos about getting specific into, you know, one type of shooter versus the other, right? So, but at a broad level, at the beginning, you're a beginner, you know, you're brand new to guns. Maybe you've never actually shot a gun before, but you have one. Maybe you've inherited a gun, or your relative gave you a gun, right? And now you want to be safe, and you want to shoot it, and you want to train with it, right? So where do you start? And, you know, for me, I think that, you know, the first thing I tell everybody is to practice picking up the gun without touching the trigger, right?
Yeah.
You know, and if you can do that, if you do that, you know, let's say I give you a drill, you put the firearm on the table and you pick it up 10 times without pointing the muzzle at anybody else, point it in a safe direction, no ammo, all that stuff. But you pick up the gun 10 times without touching the trigger, and you can do that 10 days in a row, 14 days in a row, then I think it's okay. You're starting to build the habit of keeping your finger off the trigger, right? You know, and I think, you know, driving home, from a beginner standpoint, driving home the fundamental safety rules is super important.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Like, we get a lot of people come in and they'll say, hey, I'm here to take a private lesson, and I've never touched a gun before. I don't own a gun. So we get them a rental gun and go through the whole firearm safety first. And we always give them some type of homework at the end. It's like, hey, go home and pick up the gun. You don't have to have your own gun, but as long as you have like a practice gun or a little toy gun or anything like that, like those little blue plastic ones work great. Pick up the gun and set it back down, and make sure you get your grip right every time, right?
Yeah.
That way, whenever they do come in, they're not focused on that. But usually if you do sign up for a private lesson, you never shot a gun before, like, you win, right? Because you have no bad habits. So you don't have to like worry about recorrecting those bad habits. It's like, I don't know anything. So the second they do that, it makes it a whole lot easier to teach a person, and they excel a lot faster. But yeah, they'll come in. We go over all 4 firearm safety rules, making sure they're following those at all times, making sure their fingers off the trigger, until their sights are on target. That's usually the big one, because whenever you grab something, you usually grab it with your whole hand.
Yeah.
So usually their finger goes inside the trigger, so you got to kind of correct them a couple times. And that's why the dry fire at home helps out. And I usually say for a brand new shooter, and you kind of broke it down before, like 3 different categories: a brand new shooter, I guess intermediate shooter where they're using it for self-defense, and then like the competitive shooter, or someone that's wanting to get, you know, top level of shooting, right?
Right.
But for the brand new shooter, I always say at least practice like once a month or so, like get to the range once a month. That would be ideal.
That's live fire.
Live
right?
fire.
Yeah. Okay.
Live fire once a month. You're going to hold your skills there. You can still learn a few things, you know, like the basics and things like that. You're not going to be probably the best shooter like in your area or like out of your friend group, but like at least you're following safety, and you're not going to harm yourself or someone else.
Right.
So you're picking up the gun at the house. If you like come to the live fire range, you can shoot 50 rounds, maybe 100 rounds. You don't have to shoot a lot, right? The more often that you come to the range with least amount of ammo, the better it's going to be, rather than dumping like 1,000 rounds at one practice session, right? So I always tell people, like, if all you can do is 50 rounds, then do 50 rounds that month, and that's it. But at home, they still have homework to be done. So go there at least 3 times a week. Like, pick up the gun, make sure your finger's straight off the trigger, get your grip right, put your sights on a certain target. Might be like a light switch or something like that. Make sure the gun's unloaded, obviously. But get all your grip right, and then set it back down. And do that just 10 repetitions, right? It might take 5 minutes, maybe, right? If you do that 3 times a week, and like set it in your calendar. Don't say, okay, I'm gonna do it tomorrow. Like, no, it's either Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or like however you want to schedule it. But make sure it's a priority. Don't just say I'm gonna do it whenever I have free time. Make sure it's a priority and get up and do it in the morning. Do it right before you go to bed, something like that. But do that 3 times a week and then come to the range once a month. That would be ideal, right? Moving past that would be the intermediate shooter, someone that's starting to carry a gun for self-defense, getting a little bit more involved into it, want to make sure that they're following all safety rules and protecting other people, right? Like police officers or things like that. Like if you're putting your life on the line for other people, like we need to make sure that we can accurately shoot the gun and we're at the best of our abilities.
Right.
You know? So I'd say at least twice a month come in live fire, every other week, instead of like 2 days back to back, try to spread it out to every other week. That way you're giving your time to like kind of think about and process everything that you learned and then reapply it.
Right.
And it's not a long time period in between shooting. And then in between that, you would still do the 3 days every week of picking up the gun, doing dry fire. Then you'd probably start incorporating like draw and stuff like that into dry fire, reloads. You're doing a little bit more than just like picking up the gun, making sure your hands are on the right spot.
Right.
You're incorporating more of that. But same thing, 50, 100 rounds per practice session. If you can do more, like 200 would be ideal for intermediate. Every other week. I think that'd be a good.
Every other, like, so twice a month, 200 rounds each.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that'd be a really good. You can get a lot of work done.
Certainly.
In that,
yeah.
You know? You can dot torture and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. Have a plan. Right.
Yeah, have a plan. That's whenever you actually starting to write down. And no matter what part you are, you always have a plan. We see people come in the range and they're just having like fun range days. And not saying that's a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
Like everybody has fun at the range. But if you want to learn something, don't just go over there and just start shooting.
Right.
Like go there like, hey, today I'm going to work on trigger control. Today I'm going to work on stance, grip, like whatever fundamental it's going to be. Or you might work like more advanced drills, like, transitions or something like that. But yeah, at least have a plan.
Yeah. Have you ever listened to anything like by Dave Ramsey? You heard of that guy?
I know the guy.
Yeah. So he talks about like financial responsibility and how to get out of debt and all of that stuff. Well, he has a saying, and I only know this in passing because I've heard some of his stuff. Apologies, Dave, if you're a viewer. But I believe he said something like, to get out of debt, every dollar has to have a name or something like that, right? So it means that for every dollar you have a plan for it. It's not just a free dollar that's out there. And I think it's the same thing for bullets. Once you start to train, every bullet has a name. It may be grouping, it may be doubles, it may be transitions. But if you go out there, I'm going to spend 50 rounds practicing my groups, or 50 rounds doing X, Y, and Z thing. It doesn't matter what it is. But if you have that discipline of, okay, I am going to try to get better at one thing with this amount of ammo, then you really kind of are, that's part of your plan, right? The other plan is the other part of the plan is what are you going to focus on, and I want to jump back to that in a little bit, right? Because, back to each level should be focusing on different things.
Right.
But going to the range, it is so easy because I do it, you may get 1/3 of the way into your plan and then a buddy shows up or something like that. Like, hey, how fast can you do X, Y, and Z thing? Or can you shoot this out at 55 yards or whatever? And then it becomes a game of horse, and now you're not practicing, you're just playing, and which is okay. Yeah. But you have to have a plan.
Yeah, and there's games that you can play that does like it helps that, right? Like like the horse game. Like I don't know if you ever played that during shooting. If you have a group of like 3 people, you really have to have at least 3 people or more.
Right.
You put up like a blank target out there. One person shoots the target, and then the other 2 have to get closer to that bullet hole. Right, so you have to keyhole the bullet.
Oh, I see.
And whoever gets closer to it goes first the next time.
Oh,
right?
I see.
So it's a fun game to interact with other people and stuff, and it's kind of like horse, but it's also like you're working on trigger control, accuracy, and all that other stuff too at the same time. So there's some games like that, but yeah, at least have a drill that you're gonna like focus on.
Correct.
And there's tons of drills out there like 20 alpha or 666 or doubles. Dot torture is a great drill.
Dot torture,
you can print those targets out. The list goes on. You can just look up handgun drills, and I'm sure there's tons of them out there. Accelerator.
Yeah.
So that would be like the intermediate thing. That's what you're actually working on, some of those drills and trying to increase accuracy, speed.
Yeah.
And that's what probably most of the viewers are. That's what I see 90% of the people that come in the range, that's what level they're at, right? Like you see very few people come in, and if they are at the beginning level, they go out of that very quickly, right? They don't stay in that forever because it's just like brand new shooters.
Sure.
You know, whenever they start coming to the range and actually shooting, then they move into the intermediate levels.
Right.
So I'm sure that's what people would want to know on this show.
Yeah, and I think, when I was thinking about as a beginner, I thought about a drill that, okay, what drill would I give to a beginner, right? And the drill that came to my mind is that, okay, it's just a group drill. Can you put five rounds into, a circle at 5 yards, right? Like a 2-inch circle at 5 yards. Can you do that? And I started thinking about that. I don't know if a lot of intermediate shooters that can do that either.
Yeah. They think that they're at advanced level, right? But they're usually at a beginning level because they don't know what the advanced level is, right? Like that's whenever people start shooting, they're like, "Oh, I'm a really good shooter," and like they're teacupping the gun, and
like they're doing the push pull. They got the Weaver stance going on.
They don't even know how to grip the pistol, much less like be a really good shooter.
Right.
And then they actually start like listening to whether it be podcasts or videos or taking training, and they're like, "Oh man, I don't really know very much." And then they start getting a little bit better, and they might be the best shooter out of their groups of friends.
Right.
And they're like, man, I'm really good at shooting now, right? And then they like get exposed to like a grandmaster or like something like that. And then like, even not even a grandmaster, like an A-class shooter.
Yeah,
like
well, even going to a match.
Yeah, going to a match, you're like, wow, like these guys are awesome,
There's
right?
13-year-old girls beating them. There are retirees who are using canes beating them. It's a humbling thing.
Yeah.
So, so let's go back though. So if I were to give a drill, like a reasonable drill for a beginner, right? First off, it's clearly practice all the safety rules. Make sure that all the 4 universal safety rules are burned into your memory and burned into your body mechanics, right? I.e., you don't want to have your finger on the trigger until you're supposed to, and you don't want to be waving the gun around, at people. But then after that, I think if you have a target at 5 yards, and if you have one of those silhouette targets, where they have the X and then 8, 7, 6, right? I think really 5 yards in the 6 or inward, that's probably
I would
decent,
say,
right?
I'd say 7. If you can put a target at 7 yards and shoot a B8 target, so it's like a paper plate, right? Like 9-inch group.
Okay.
That's like high thoracic cavity, like somewhere center mass. If you can put 10 rounds into there, then like let's move on to different drills.
Let's get better at the fundamentals now.
Exactly.
It's now not the you proved that you can be safe, right? Because you could control 10 rounds, and do it multiple times, right? Don't go out one day and just do it once and like, okay, now I'm good.
Yeah.
You have to be able to repeat the skill
and do it by yourself. Because anybody, if you're not afraid of the gun going off, I can get you to shoot that drill in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And keep all rounds into the paper plate very easily. So that's why I think like after that would be not beginner anymore.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if I'm not sitting there talking you through every shot and you can do it on your own, then you're into the next level.
Yeah. So that's probably a very good drill. Okay, if you're a very beginner, you've never shot before, or you're within your first 300 rounds ever in your life, then that's a reasonable thing to do. Yep. Okay, so now let's probably focus on a drill. There are more drills. There are going to be a bunch of drills for this next section of people who are, trying to learn this to protect themselves, to get more proficient, to be able to make their group sizes smaller, all of these things. Forget competition. This is just, for protection, say.
And right? Even if you go into the next level after this, you're still going to do those drills.
It's all the same stuff.
Yeah, it's all the same drills. Whenever you go back into that fundamentals, I would say 20 alpha, shoot that drill, 666, like you said.
I like the Frank Garcia's dot drill. That's a really good one.
That's
That's
very
tough one.
hard. Yeah, that's a tough one.
That's more on the advanced side.
Yeah,
that's more on the advanced
one.
side. But yeah,
it's still a really good drill. Dot torture is
Yeah.
very similar to that. It's just like a little bit more wiggle room.
Right,
Dot
right.
torture.
Yeah.
But yeah, doing those things and making sure you're getting really good accuracy. You're getting good grip, follow up shots. You can reload the gun. You can draw the pistol. So you're kind of throwing in draws on there, like on dot torture. You draw the pistol, shoot one round, reholster. So you're throwing that stuff into there and getting a little bit more advanced. It's not just picking the gun up off the table at a range and doing that.
Right. So then giving a framework for the shooter who's trying to get into that. I think, again, starting with the safety fundamentals, you're going to be doing more gun manipulation, right? So in dry fire, let's practice draw and make sure that your finger never touches the trigger until you're on the target, right?
Yeah, our sights are on target. Like we're seeing the sights.
Yeah. Good, very good point. Very good point. Same thing with your reloads, right? So, when you're performing your reload motions, make sure that your finger comes off the trigger or is already off the trigger before you hit that button, and you manipulate your gun to do a reload, right? Practice this before you have bullets in the gun.
Yeah.
Because as what you'll see as you progress is that the assumption that you are able to keep your finger off the trigger at the correct times is all built in. Nobody's going to start telling you, hey, keep your finger off the trigger, until you start having accidental discharges. Right. And then you completely rewind back to the square one. It's like, okay, well, clearly you didn't build that fundamental into your body mechanics enough. Yeah.
It's not subconscious yet.
Yes. And it 100% needs to be. Like, that's the most fundamental thing that you need to have throughout all of this.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like there's no, I never think about taking my finger off the trigger or putting it on the trigger during shooting.
Correct.
It just never crosses my mind.
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time I did that, Another thing to practice is moving with the gun. So at this next level, if you're doing defensive shooting or carrying a gun, it's not just going to the range, unpacking the gun out the bag and setting it on the table and picking it up. You're going through draws, but also after you finish using it, what are you going to do with the gun? You can't just keep it pointed down range. You need to make sure you can move around your house with it. So pick up the gun, make sure there's no bullets in it, but walk around your house and make sure you're not pointing at people.
Right. It's find all the safe directions.
All those safe directions. Cheat code, it's either up or down. Right. It's one of the two. You're not pointing it and walking through your house, having it next to your side.
Right.
Right. You either have the gun as high up as possible, somewhere it's indexing on your head, or somewhere it's down below, indexing on the outseam of your pants, something, right? It's just not waving around there. But you're walking around with it and doing that. I'd say that would be the next thing to practice too. And Ellie does that, my little girl, she started doing that, I think 6 years old, carrying her gun from the vehicle to the range back and forth. Right. And she's 6 years old. So it's not like you have to be great to do that, but you need to practice that because that's a huge skill that you need to have if you're carrying a gun every day.
Yeah. So, okay. So now the thing that everyone wants to know, what are the drills? So I think the first thing you might want to look at is if you're not able to hold a tight group, if you're not able to get, let's say you're at 7 yards or 10 yards, if you can't get 10 into the 10 ring, then you need to look at trigger control.
Yeah, trigger control. I have a drill on our Facebook page. We'll put it on our YouTube channel too. It's 1 inch squares. I just took a tape gun, flipped the target backwards, and just put a bunch of pieces of tape on it, right? So they're a little bit smaller. I think a piece of tape's 7/8 inches or something like that.
Right.
But put 10 of them across, put a target at 5 yards, and try to hit one bullet hole in that one piece of tape. Then move on to the next one, right? So what you're trying to do is making sure that whenever you're pressing the trigger, you're pressing it straight back. You're not moving the trigger over one side or the other side. Usually right-handed shooters, they shoot low left. Left-handed shooters, they shoot low right, right? So in order to stop doing that, make sure you're pressing the trigger. And as soon as the trigger breaks, you see the shot on the target, see what that feels like, right? If you felt hey, it's straight back, you might have to start pulling the trigger almost to the right side.
Right.
And then if it hits straight on the target, then you're okay, that's what straight back really feels like. Right. So you keep doing that and seeing what the outcome is and fine tuning exactly what it feels like with the outcome. And then it'll tell you, hey, this is what I keep doing. Right. So that's how you, fix trigger control. Don't worry about grip. at that time. Like people compensate with it. Like, hey, I squeeze the gun harder with my left hand. Like, yeah, it'll stop you from doing that. But all you're doing is kicking a can down the road. Right.
Yeah.
You still need to know how to press the trigger. And also you'll focus on grip and stance and everything else at this time. Right. In the intermediate phase.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's trigger control. And I think that's, shooting at the 10 ring, at 7 yards, say, if you can get 10 in the 10 ring, okay, you pass trigger control, I think, right? Yep. Grip. What do you think about grip? What would you do for grip?
Yeah. It's kind of difficult because like you hear people talk about it and every instructor explains it a little bit different. And the way that I explain it, you might be like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. But then you might hear something from somebody else and like, well, I understand that part better, So like, it just depends on who it is. For grip, I can explain it and I explain it in the classroom and people's like, okay, I kind of get it. But until we get out in the range and I actually place their hands on the gun where it needs to be,
right,
and actually apply pressure on the gun, and like, oh, okay, like now I understand how much pressure to apply on the gun.
Right.
So really, in-person training is the best for that.
Sure.
So sign up if it's a half hour or so. Like I'll tell people like, hey, squeeze the gun as hard as you possibly can with your left hand, right?
Yeah.
And that's controversial. People's like, oh, don't squeeze it. No, you squeeze the gun as hard as possible.
Yeah.
Right. You never not squeeze it. Blake's famous for cracking grips, right?
Yeah.
Like one of our friends, he used to crack plastic grips because he squeezes them so hard. Yeah. But you watch him shoot a gun, his grip's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Right?
Our friend, the world champion.
Yeah, he's a world champion pistol shooter. His grip's great because of that.
Yeah.
So you can never squeeze the gun hard enough. If you can squeeze it so hard that bullets fly out the gun or you crack the gun, that's how hard I want you to squeeze in the gun. Right. So I'll tell people that and they're like, yeah, I understand it. And then we get out to the range, they start shooting, the gun's moving around. So I'm like, hey, move your left hand. And I put my left hand there and I actually squeeze the gun for them.
Right.
And they're like, wow, like you're squeezing the gun as hard as possible. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I told you.
Yeah.
So until they feel that and like feel my hand on the gun and they're like, okay, now I know how hard I got to squeeze it.
Right.
And then also like where the tension's at, right? So like all the tension would be on the top of the gun instead of the bottom of the gun or things like little bitty tweaks like that. So in-person training would be the best.
Sure.
But try to look up different videos or whatever it might be to try to get an idea at where hand placement is and then kind of start tweaking it on the range. So if you want to do it yourself, you can start applying pressure at different spots and seeing how the recoil looks on the gun.
Yeah.
I can tell you it's going to take a lot longer for you to do that because you're going to waste 500 rounds.
Yeah.
At just different times.
Trying to debug it.
Yeah, trying to debug it. Sign up for a half-hour private lesson and you're done, right?
Yeah, and if you're not in our area, sign up with anybody.
Qualified instructor.
Do your research, find a good instructor in your area, but they will be able to help you with this.
Yeah,
right?
Ideally a competition shooter like a USPSA Grandmaster if you have one around.
Yeah,
like sign up for his class or a private lesson from them. Not like just fly by night.
Yes,
law enforcement or something like that. Like might not have the best shooting parts.
Right.
They might have better tactic parts, but like try to find some type of competitive shooter that all he focuses on fundamentals.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, the way I would start to see, or try to diagnose a grip problem is that if you on your target, if you have shots that are everywhere, right? I mean, at this level, it's really difficult to determine whether it's a trigger pull problem versus a grip problem. But usually you're going to see like a shotgun pattern on the target if it's a grip problem. Yeah. If it's a trigger control problem, you're going to see a lot of stuff go low and the opposite of your shooting hand. So if you're a right-hand shooter, you see it go low left. If you're a left-hand shooter, you see it go low right. That's going to be more of a trigger problem than a grip problem. But
you're still having groupings with a trigger problem.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So, but if it's this just Picasso of bullet holes, then you probably have a grip problem. And so this is where you'd want to start focusing on, hey, like you say, you hold the gun really hard as hard as you can with your support hand. I always like to use Ben's hold the gun, crush the gun. You hold it with your shooting hand, you crush it with your other hand. Yep. Makes sense. Latham, he has his own way. Max has his own way. Yes, everybody has their own way to say it.
Says it a different way, and it's not saying that one way is wrong or the other way. Like we're all doing the same thing. Yes. It's just like how we explain it.
Correct.
Right?
100%.
And I'll explain it multiple different ways sometimes. Like I have a way of doing it, but then like I'll try to like translate it into the easiest way for them to remember, right? So it's just however you can get the information across.
Yeah.
And usually for grip and stance, it's like showing them, like putting your hands on the gun and showing them physically. I think that's the best option possible. Yeah. And stance would also kind of go into this too, because that shotgun pattern is usually them anticipating the gun, right? So the gun's moving around so much that it's like beating them up that they start getting like intimidated of the gun or scared of the gun. So they start forcing the gun where they want it to go,
right?
Instead of just like letting the gun shoot, right?
Yep.
So that's whenever you fix that problem, then trigger control problem would be a grouping issue.
Yep. So that's grip, trigger control. I mean, really, that's at the intermediate levels. That's where you're doing a lot of your work, right? Because it's going to be, you're going to draw, shoot. So that's going to be grip, trigger control. You're going to reload, which is a gun manipulation. So, okay, reload and then shoot. You're going to shoot before and shoot after. That's both going to have some sort of implication on grip, trigger control, right?
Right.
I guess the other thing that you would start to do at this level is maybe transitioning between two targets.
Yeah,
right?
I would probably save it for the advanced
Think
stuff.
So?
Yeah,
Okay.
like I mean, you could start at this like a very basic things. Other things I'd probably work on would be like malfunction drills.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't spend tons of time on this. Like I talked about this in the dry fire video. You see, especially in the tactical world, guys will train malfunction drills like every practice, right? And like they'll do like half the practice of doing malfunction drills. It's like you don't have a malfunction on a pistol that much, right? Don't practice it all the time. You should know how to clear it, right? Ideally, you should know how to clear it. That's great, but like don't spend 50 rounds trying to work malfunctions. It's okay, right? Worry about on the fundamental side of doing it. On the sight picture, sight alignment, that usually comes from beginning levels, like making sure you can line up the sights and stuff. That's pretty easy. So by that time, you probably already know how to do that part. But follow through is another important thing that you want to start doing at this level, because you can't move on to the advanced level without knowing follow through. Calling your shot, making sure you know exactly where the shot goes because you're watching the sight so closely and you're having good follow through on the shot. That's a huge thing I definitely practice in this one.
Calling your shot. That's probably a good one to call out here at the intermediate level. You can start doing that kind of drill.
Definitely.
The one thing I like for calling your shot that the guys hate is that I'll take a target and I'll put a T-shirt on it.
Yep.
Have you seen that? I've showed you this before, right? Take a T-shirt and you get a little whiteboard. You can get them at Walmart, right? And you put the target out 15, 20 yards, far enough where you can't see the bullet hole. And you shoot one shot or two shots at the T-shirt, right? Plain T-shirt, you can't make any markings. And before you pull the target in, you mark where you think the holes went on the whiteboard, right? And you pull it in and you look where the holes were, right? And you're either right or you're wrong, So
the a little bit easier way in doing it, instead of people like coming to the range and like
with a T-shirt,
putting T-shirts on the targets and then falling down halfway through the range. Is just
don't do this at Sentry.
Put like our B-27 targets are blue. So like a dark blue, and if you put them all the way at 25, like you can't really see where the bullet hole goes, right? Because it's like black background and it kind of once the bullet holes go through, it turns black, so you can't really see. So put the target out at 25 yards, and you just get a second target and like kind of mark it with two pieces of tape that you can like remove, like painter's tape. And shoot, just like you said, 2 rounds. So you got to show me this drill. Shoot 2 rounds, and then put the piece of tape wherever you want to, and bring back the target. And that way you can move the pieces of tape after every drill, and see exactly where they are.
So, calling shots is probably the most advanced thing you should do in this level. I think
once you do that, I think I always say this, like if you can call your shot, that's what takes a good shooter. Like people's like, oh, I'm a good shooter, to like a great shooter, right? Like once you do that, okay, now you're like really understanding shooting, and you're in the advanced level, right? Like if you can call your shot,
right. At that distance,
if you can call your shot, and it doesn't have to be on the X, right? Like that's what people like. Oh, I can't shoot 25 yards. Like no, we're not trying to hit the X. We're trying to bring the gun up as fast as possible and shoot the gun. And we don't care where it's at on the target, but we just have to call it.
So long as you know where it was.
As long as you know where it was. Like if it's in the left shoulder and you say, hey, it was in the left shoulder, you win. Like it's just like hitting the X, right? Like that's the goal. It doesn't have to hit the X. We just want to know where it's going to be at.
Right. Yes, because when you get advanced and you start playing games with guns, like USPSA or whatever it is, we're going to start talking about the speed of your follow-up shot or the speed of your miss.
Yeah,
you know?
you're shooting in real time.
Yeah.
Like you're not like shooting the gun and then checking the target. Like no one does that.
Correct.
Right? Not at advanced.
You shouldn't.
Level. No, you shouldn't do that.
Unless you're Eric. I heard Eric does that.
Really?
Yeah.
Like if you're at an advanced level, you should call it off the front sight or off the dot. As soon as that dot lifts or that front sight lifts, I know where the bullet's going to go.
Right.
I don't have to look at the target.
Right.
Right. If you are, you're shooting behind.
Correct. Yeah. Then you're too late. Then you're chasing yourself.
Yeah, you're shooting in the past.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So, all right, advanced shooters. So this is where we're gonna put your competition shooters. These are your really advanced, your level 2 tactical guys.
Where
all of
police
that
officers should be.
Right. Yes. Yes. Some of our police officers are.
Some of them are. Like usually, if you go to a police range, their instructors are at this level, right? Like they're working a lot harder. They're looking for more stuff to do, looking to get better. But like the normal police officer that just goes to the range and just qualifies, they're not going into this.
Yeah.
Right. They're not even probably going into the intermediate level. They're not getting to the range twice a month.
Right.
But this would be, I would say, going to the range every week. You're practicing every week, at least instead of every other week, and you're dry firing at least 3 days a week from there. But ideally, you'd be shooting like 3 times a week and then dry fire in between.
Right.
So if you're touching a gun every day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I know that's some people are like, man, that's crazy. Like, you're shooting every day, but like, if that's what you want to be the best, then that's what you got to do.
You have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
certainly.
that's what you have to do. You have to shoot the gun 3 practice sessions a week and 3 dry fire practice sessions a week.
Yeah. 100%. Now, and I think, the way to kind of, to show the difference is that, so if you're a beginner level shooter on a year, you're probably shooting less than 1,000 rounds.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and to a lot of people, they're like, 1,000 rounds a year, that's a lot. It's like, let me finish.
Yep.
An intermediate shooter who is going to the range every week or and spending 100 rounds, that if you're going every week, that's 5,200 rounds, right?
Yeah, I'll just say 5,000.
Yeah. So, if you think about it, that okay, if you're an intermediate level shooter, then your entry level criteria is about 5,200 rounds, right? If you're going regularly, maybe not, maybe between 3,000 and 5,000, right?
Yeah.
If you're an advanced shooter, then your starting criteria is about 10,000 rounds a year.
Yeah, I was gonna say 20.
Yeah.
I'd say like if you're gonna get you want to get master GM level, you're at 20,000 to 100,000.
Well, I even say that if you are like C class and above and practicing, you're already going through 10,000 rounds a year.
Oh yeah. No, I'm saying like if you want to be GM.
Oh, if you want. Oh yeah.
You don't have to be GM, but
Oh.
like if you're wanting to be GM or if you're wanting to be a top level contender,
Easily. Yes.
you're practicing
Yes.
20,000 to 100,000 rounds a year.
Easily. Yeah.
And that's
because
what
the
this
top
level is.
guys, top guys are practicing 100,000 rounds a year.
Yep.
So,
Some are practicing less, but like
well, yeah.
It's-
I mean, there's always the anomaly.
yeah, like I shoot 30 about. Blake
Yeah.
shoots 30 about. But so like
But
I think
Max,
Max shoots
80,
75,
90, yeah, I mean-
75 to 100. Eric shoots 100. I heard
Easy.
know?
On non-world shoot years, 100.
Yeah.
Yeah. So world shoot years, I think it's double.
Yep. AMU guys shoot, I don't know, like a ton because they get, as much ammo as they want. But and those guys are great shooters. Like if you watch their fundamentals, they're unbelievable.
They're dialed in.
Yeah, they're so dialed in. Like
Yeah.
they get to a match and me and Blake got beat by them one year at Area 4 because of that. Getting there and they're just like out shooting us because, they're taking partials with like 0.18 splits. And it's like, man, it's like, all right, we're not shooting enough.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it comes down to.
But and that's no disrespect to anybody. Like, I mean, that's just where people are. I mean, a lot of people don't have the time nor the budget to put 3,000 to 5,000 rounds. I mean, police, they go qualify. The only free rounds they get a year are the 150 or 200 they get for quals.
Yeah.
And then it's on their own dime to go get better.
Yeah.
A lot of them.
And
so,
it's not like, no matter how harsh it sounds, it's just like if you're not doing that, you're not going to be the best.
Correct.
Like,
Yeah.
There's no sugarcoating it. If you're going to say, hey, I'm not going to do that, well, then you're not going to be the best.
Right.
Like, I hate to tell you, but
Yeah.
it's not going to happen. Everybody wants 6-pack abs, but unless you do the work,
unless you're doing
do it,
sit-ups,
right?
then you're not going to.
So same thing with shooting. Like
Yeah.
unless you're putting in the time, you're putting in the money and ammo budget.
Right.
Do that. Not saying you have to do that, right? Like that's why we didn't put self-defense in this category, right?
Right. No,
like
no,
you don't have to do this to carry a gun every day. If you're just doing it for self-defense, you're staying in the intermediate level.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's no need to. I mean,
there's no need to jump into that.
Right.
level, You know, but like you have USPSA guys that are at a C or B class level, and they're like, man, I want to get to like the next level, right? They kind of plateau at that level.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm shooting matches every week, you know, coming to your match, or I'm shooting matches at least once a month. Right.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm just staying here. I'm like, well, like, what else are you doing? Well, I'm shooting matches every month. I'm like, you're not practicing.
That's what got you to see.
That's
what got you to be. Yeah.
You're not going to hit master. You're not going to hit grandmaster if you're doing just matches. Like matches are not practice.
Exactly.
So you still have to come to the range, you know, 3 times a week, at least twice a week, right? And you're shooting, you're practicing, and you're shooting the match, right? So the match can be one of those practice days of the 3 times a week, but you still got to come and practice the other 2 days, right? And you're dry firing 3 days a week. You're putting 20,000 rounds down range every year. That's what's going to get you to that next level.
Well, yeah, I've told, we were just talking about it this weekend with somebody. I forget who it was at the match. And, you know, because we just had the classifier match this week. And they were talking about, oh man, you know, from C to B, you know, got to get these things. I was like, you have to understand what C class right now, I don't even know what the percentage is. Let's say it's 60%, right? That is you, right? You have to improve 10% above that. Like you have to get 10% better than you already are. Don't, you know, it's like, you can't really think about it as just a static thing that you, okay, to get 100% of this classifier, you know, I had to do XYZ thing. It's like, yes, you do. But for you to be able to do that, you yourself have to get 10% better. And if the current output that you have got you to C class, then you have to do more to get to B class, you know, somewhere. You've got to find a way to get 10% better. And usually 9 times out of 10, that means you got to put more time into it.
Yeah.
So
that's
all
it is.
And then, geez, I mean, imagine, you know, you're an M trying to go to GM, you've got to improve 5%. But you're already the fastest guy, you know, in your area. You're fastest guy, probably, you know, top 5 fastest guys in the state or something like that, as a master or whoever, you know. But you as a person have to improve 5% more. So like, how do you improve 5% more when you're already like 85, 90%? You got to put a lot of rounds down range.
And then once you become that, it's like, okay, how do I get to like super squad? Right? It's like now you got to improve a 1% in order to get to the super squad level out of the top 15.
Right? But they're also improving. A 0.5% in order to win.
Right. Like every 15 of those guys they're just trying to get that 0.5% in order to win the match that year. Like that's so.
And that 0.5% is like, that's 50,000 rounds right there.
Yeah, exactly. Know? Like that. So. That's what they're stopping at. Like, oh man, if I just get to GM, it's like, no, that's like to a guy that's in the 0.5%. That's like that's child's play, right? Like that's like the beginning. Of the start.
GM just happens because they're trying to win the match.
Exactly. Yeah. So. Like they don't even think about hitting GM. They're like, yeah, I did that so long ago that it's not even a thing anymore. Right.
Yeah.
Then GM try to get into that super squad level or that top 1%.
Yeah.
And then those top 1% guys try to get to the one.
Yeah. So
the winning of the match.
So anyway, tangent. Let's go back to, that was a tangent. Let's go back to, how does a advanced shooter improve their skills? And I think this is where you bring the timer in.
Yeah.
You've got to stress test your skills. So now you've built all of these fundamentals from beginner to intermediate. Now you're an advanced shooter, or you're an aspiring advanced shooter. The timer comes into play because now time is important, you know, and you have to stress test everything.
Yeah. You're doing timers work, everything's on a timer. You're knowing what your splits are, like, knowing all the math,
right?
Like, you know, how long did it take to shoot a 7-yard target? How long it takes to shoot a 15-yard target, 25-yard target? How long it takes to transition from one target to another target at this certain distance?
Right.
You know, like, all that's, the breakdown of all that, and you know where your skill level's at.
I think it's even more specific than that, because I talked to some people about this in their stage plans, right? And it's not even just what's your draw at 5. It's like, what's your alpha at 5? You know, what's your alpha to like a completely wide open target versus what's your alpha to a partial versus to a no shoot to a head box. Like all of those distances, you got to know. You got to know where, do you need to know it to the 100th second? No, but you have to know, like, okay,
to the 10th.
To a 10th.
Yeah, I know it was 10th. Like 1.2 on a partial at,
at 10 yards or something.
10, 15 yards is like where I'm at, anything open target within 10 yards in, it should be a second. Easy, like a little bit under. You transition, you split time on all those targets.
Yeah.
To where if you have a swinger or something else like a bobber, I know how far I got to get back to that.
Right.
To where if I know like, hey, it's going to present itself at 1 second, well, I can transition to this target, double this target, and then shoot this other one, then coming back to it.
Right. Or you got to play ping pong. It's like I know it's going to take me 0.8 to find that target, so I'm going to go pop, 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 pop. And then it's math. Like, okay, which one's faster? Is it faster for me to ambush this thing and then come back over here, or do I need to do the ping pong game or something like that? Yeah. Right. At the advanced level, I can tell you that we cannot prescribe. I can't prescribe anything specific to you to get better, but you need to know your times, and then you need to compare those times to other people that you're chasing to see where their times are.
Yeah. And you're still doing the same drills. Like I said, like the same drills that you did, you're just adding in a timer. You never get away from those drills.
Correct.
Right? Like no matter who you are, you're always going back to the fundamentals. You're always correcting trigger control, grip, stance. You're fine tuning those things very quickly, but you're still going to that. Every year, like whenever you restart, you kind of like have to do that. You have to know where you're at. Hey, am I at the fundamentals that I need to be, or do I need to still work on that for about a month before I start moving on to more advanced stuff, stages and stuff like that? And that's next thing I would probably say is like you're starting to work some stages in there. Try to find a range that can let you do that, or go shoot matches. Yeah. If you don't have the practice session to do it, then shoot matches and work on it at a local match, right? Like, hey. Because that's the best way. You don't have to set it up. You don't have to do anything. Right. It's super easy. You just show up and you shoot it.
Yeah.
So, but don't take it as like, hey, I need to win this, or I need to like shoot it as that.
Right.
Go in there with a plan, just like in practice. Like, hey, this practice session, I'm gonna work on trigger control. So, like at a local match, go in there and be like, hey, this practice match, I'm gonna work on calling my shots. Right. Or this practice match, I'm gonna work on movement. This practice match, I'm gonna work on entries, on exits, on like something. Pick something you're gonna work on. Just concentrate about that. Don't even worry about where the shots go. I don't care if I win, lose the match. It does not matter.
Exactly.
All I'm focusing on is this.
Right.
And do that for a couple months, and then be like, all right, now I have that subconscious. Now I'm gonna move on to the next thing.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that would be the next level of doing it. And you're still practicing the fundamental stuff. You're practicing on your practice times, not on the match times. So you're getting like double of that. Right.
Yeah. Because if all you have is a booth, for example, if you're a shooter at Sentry Defense, all you have is the booth. You can practice all of that stuff in the booth. But the match stuff, the
movement stuff, you got to practice in the match.
You have to do, and especially if you don't have, access to an outdoor range, then you definitely, the match is where you have to practice it, right? I will say, that you can dry fire some of that, because there are a lot of the movement, especially the gross movement type stuff, where like leaning, how do you lean and take a target, or how do you exit on a lean, those kinds of things. You don't have to have bullets in the gun to be able to practice that. But, when you're in this advanced category, whether you're a competitive shooter or not, this is where you start to practice those situations where nothing's ideal, right? Because, from competition, there are a lot of 9 times out of 10, there's no ideal. You're not standing and shooting. That you're moving, you're leaning, you're backing up, you're forward. You're looking for something else. You only see the target for maybe a half a second. There are a bunch of different scenarios that you get into in competition shooting that you can practice without bullets, in a sense. But at some point, you have to go to the match, or especially if you don't have a place to practice, this stuff. Go to the match and you say, okay, well, this match has a swinger. Perfect. Today, I'm going to work. I've been working on the swinger and dry fire. I'm going to work on this. I'm going to take, activator, target, swinger. Like that's my sequence today. And if I can get that, then I win. Then I prove the point.
And don't use that as an excuse. Don't be like, oh, I don't have a place to practice that stuff, so I'm never going to get that good. So I'm just, that's what it is. It's like, no, the top 1% is practicing that in live fire.
Yeah.
But like, if you're there, then you're going to have opportunities. Like opportunities are going to present themselves, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to start knowing people. You're going to start doing things like, oh, where do y'all practice? They invite you over to practice or something.
Yeah.
Like you're going to have that. So focus on the things that you can do. The people that make excuses like that say, I don't have that facility or I don't have that thing, they don't even come to the range to practice regular live fire stuff.
Right.
So don't give me that excuse, because like you have all the things here for you to get to almost that level, but you're not using it. So you can't use that as an excuse.
No, right? I mean, and really, if you go to an outdoor match, a lot of times after you tear down, you can ask the people who are running the match to let you practice right after that match. So if you go find an outdoor match, ask the match director, hey, can I just work on something for a half hour after this? Boom. 9 times out of 10, if you help them tear down the stage, they're like, okay, yeah, it's fine. You leave whatever part you need over there, you shoot it, and then you tear it down. They don't care, right? Because they're going to be tearing down everything else, getting everything done. Exactly. If you're there for a half hour, it's not going to be that big of a lift on the match director.
Right.
So
not at Sentry.
Yeah, definitely not. Yeah,
not at Sentry at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
We're ready to get home. But
that's right.
Yeah, other matches and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm sure they would like to do that.
So anyway, we've been going for almost an hour on this.
Yeah, this is a big thing for sure, because we have a lot of questions about this from beginner, intermediate, and advanced. I see it from all different levels. So I'm glad that we were able to do this show and kind of like put it down on paper, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's what I would think that you would have to do, and that's the 3 different levels. Always break it down those levels.
Yeah.
And like look for the next thing to do. Yeah. Right? Like keep chasing after that. There's never a time where you're just like complacent. If you're complacent, that's where you stay at.
Yeah, you're not going to get any better.
Yep.
So if you have any questions, guys, ask them in the comments, because I mean, this could go 100 different ways. We could talk about this for probably 10 hours and still not cover everything. So, let us know what you're thinking, and we'll try to address it next time. All right. Cool. Anything else?
That's it.
Awesome.